Thank you, Halil. Eloise, we want to hear from you.
Thank you, thank you. So actually, I would like to say that I'm a bit disappointed to see that there is still this kind of vision that is shared by the majority of either Europeans or Africans that the Europe is seeing Africa as underdeveloped, as being not as an equal partner to Europe, and on the other way that Africa is seeing Europe as in initiative to hunt grounds and take into its possession the resources of Africa. I mean, I don't think that is the case anymore. I think the European Union has actually kind of quite done some work on seeing Africa as a strategic partner, as an equal partner. And I do think that this pandemic is actually reinforcing that trend. And I do think that indeed this is the case. Now, Europe and Africa are equal partners. We are interlinked, our fates are linked for the future, and we need to support each other. There is a need for solidarity. But I don't see how we could find new commonalities, common grounds, have a new partnership without this change of cultural vision. Otherwise, we're never going to evolve into a real equal relationship. So firstly, I would like to say that. And then coming back to what Her Excellency said about the kind of the reluctant European Union member states about the really ambitious Franco-German proposition, as well as the European Commission new proposition for the recovery plan, as well as the multi-financial framework for the EU. I think indeed they are really reluctant, but I don't think it's for economic concerns. I think it's more about the consequences that such a step would mean for the European project. Because right now, as it has been mentioned, there is a lot of Euroscepticism still, and not everyone believes that the EU should take the way forward a step more towards more federalization, more supranationality. And I think the fact that the EU and the European Commission could indebt itself is actually a step that it has been debated by scholars, by students, but it has never really been on the table of the Council. And that is a huge step. And if actually European member states agree, it will mean a great deal for the European project and its development. So I think the reluctant part of those 4 or 5 member states are more onto what it would mean for the EU and its development towards a more federal kind of organization rather than the economic part of it. And then I actually identified a few challenges. I mean, the first one for me in the post-pandemic world is already going to find a vaccine for all that is affordable for all. And that is a goal of the World Health Organization, but also from the European Union. We want it to be, the European Union wants it to be a common universal good, so that it's accessible for everyone in Europe, but also, for everyone, Southern America, and of course, Africa. And I think that's going to be a challenge because I don't think it's going to be decided upon at the World Health Organization. Not everyone is happy about it, especially the US. So that is going to be a challenge for us as Europeans and Africans to push that forward. And then I think another challenge is going to be the regulatory challenge between the EU and Africa to take its partnership to the next level and actually have the opportunities and embrace the benefits from the new strategic autonomy rhetoric of the European Union. Because I've seen a reportage on the Minister of Industry of Morocco, and he was actually saying that they are welcoming European industries to Morocco as part of the relocalization strategy of the EU. But it is really important to say that this is not going to happen if we don't move forward in our relationship in terms of regulation, because right now The regulation, of course, it has to be scaled up and down depending on the African countries and the bilateral agreements with the EU. But right now, the regulatory framework is not there to attract European businesses. European businesses would rather relocalize in the eastern part of Europe, part of the European Union, but also with cheaper labor, rather than going into neighboring and friendly countries like the African Mediterranean countries. So I think there is a real challenge there. And I think it is going to be in the hands of Africa to move forward on that, either bilaterally or through multilateral organization like the Union for the Mediterranean. There is great potential. And I think Africa would be a great strategic partner for the EU to be more strategically autonomous, but there is a real need to move forward on regulation first. Thank you.
We're gonna stay with you because Eloise don't leave yet. So could you please unmute your
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, because the last question was about the opportunities, and you basically mentioned the challenges, but also the opportunities. So I would like you to elaborate and you leave us with a good taste in the mouth about what do you see like to be an opportunity. If we want to see, do you see a future, an optimistic future between these relationships, and what areas do you think that you see that is an immediate collaboration in the near future?
All right. I mean, for me, I think indeed, as you mentioned, it's directly drawback to the challenges that I mentioned. Indeed, I think there is huge opportunities for Africa and the EU to collaborate further. We hope that it's going to actually improve our collaboration in the future. And, as I mentioned, European strategic autonomy and this idea and this new relocalization strategy or for strategic industry in Europe it's actually a huge potential for Africa and African countries. But as I mentioned, regulation is going to be an issue there. So there is a huge opportunity, but also huge challenge. And I do hope that under either the Union for the Mediterranean or bilaterally, we're going to find solutions. So I think the European Commission and African countries are going to have a lot of work to do to develop those partnerships. And indeed, I don't think it's going to be only limited to economic partnership furthering, because for example, under the Union for the Mediterranean, there are different pillars. One is economy, of course, but there is also civil society, youth engagement, cultural exchanges. And I think if we further a partnership into economic grounds, of course, the others will follow. And I think this is a huge opportunity for Africa and Europe to be closer and to bring about better understandings of everyone's cultures, and as well differences. It's important to be aware of those, and better awareness will make us more able to actually go forward into furthering a partnership. Because as I mentioned before, if there is still this archaical view of Europe wanting to grab Africa's resources and Africa seeing Europe as a threat, we're not going to further a partnership. And I don't think that's what Europe wants. Europe sees Africa as a strategic partner, and it's going to need Africa for its European strategic autonomy rhetoric, but also for its decarbonization strategy. As Her Excellency said, in terms of renewables, Europe is not going to be able to achieve its own targets without the help and the support of other countries. And African countries actually have been ahead as to that. There are a lot of renewable potential there. So the EU is more than willing to go forward and find an equal, balanced partnership, because we have realized with the pandemic, and the pandemic I just reiterated and reinforced that vision, that Africa and African countries are actually strategical partners to the EU, and our fates are tied. So I think there is a lot of potential, and I'm looking forward to see where that leads us.
Very good. Khalil, what is the opportunities for Africa? What is your comments on that? After speaking about the challenges, let's go into the opportunities.
Well, I think the immediate opportunity will be first knowledge and skill transfer from Europe to Africa. Seeing what has happened and how easily you can get caught up, in minutes of time over with not so little issue like the pandemic has happened, so there will be definitely an immediate opportunity around knowledge and skill transfer from Africa to Europe, and also vice versa in terms of traditional medicine, and also how to deal with pandemic approach, and also in terms of infrastructure. We have realized that a lot of African businesses rely heavily on the human presence. If you take Europe or America, for example, despite people not going out, it's a luxury, when it comes to the lockdown is a luxury in Europe, but in Africa it's the other way around. People eat on a day-by-day basis. So I think also that possesses an immediate, opportunity for Europe to work with Africa to have similar kind of infrastructure, because you never know when the next pandemic is going to happen, and people have already suffered this one, and I believe they're not going to have this come again unprepared, So those two key areas, I believe, possesses a strong thing. But also, just to add on the side of opportunity, which is an opportunity for Africa to voice out their own concern. We have seen a lot of, even though the government is not entirely responsible for the case of the pandemic, we have seen a lot of countries all over the world holding the government responsible one way or the other. We have seen people being on the edge, just waiting for the slightest thing to happen, and then they'll react, And you have seen how Africa has not waited for that to happen, and is immediately taking those into consideration when taking decisions, most especially around the lockdown. So it's an opportunity for also the European states to learn from Africa that you don't wait for certain things to happen before you react. So mainly, to summarize, one, knowledge transfer, and also infrastructural boosts, to support Africa so that we operate at similar level in terms of exchange, so that the like of this gap will not happen whenever there is a similar issue around the globe.
Thank you, Khalil. And now we're gonna finish this round of questions with Her Excellency. Please enlighten us with what is the opportunities in common for us.
Well, we have a lot of opportunities which can be, in front of us, because as I said, and just a couple of details about the reappraisal of the global transformations that we need, we will have to reorganize space and to reinvent tools. So that makes a lot of things to do. And especially to move away from productivity, which is totally destructive for the ecology and for the survival of humanity on this planet. So we can together manage better scarce resources, which are absolutely important: water, energy, arable lands, wiser management of the wastes, because we are very close, and we see now Europe sending its waste to Africa. So despite, I will respond later to Eloise, because on the contrary, what I wish is a strong Europe, which is confident of itself and which can have strategic view to share prosperity with neighbors. Don't forget that Africa is the closest continent to Europe. Europe, Africa are really the closest, with the Mediterranean, which is hopefully a bridge, not a barrier, as some have said. So in this scope of opportunities to reorganize everything, first of all, we have to make a new reappraisal of the very basis of cooperation. It is true, Eloise, that we have had hundreds of summits, of recommendations. I mean, you can go through them, and the latest one among them is a very good one, the proposals and recommendation of a mixed committee, which has been set up, the high-level panel by the European Union, Friends of Europe, I was mentioning, and as well Mo Ibrahim Foundation, And they have been working for 2 years now, right after the summit of Abidjan in 2017. And they have made proposals for common strategies, for instance, to address the digital problem, which is a huge promise, but still a problem in Africa, among other things. So we have many, many avenues and we can go there. But what is basic is that we have to have a shared vision where we want to go, with differentiated roles for each, not only continent, but sub-regions and regions in Europe, which are sometimes quite autonomous, and new actors, which are the local communities, the urban cities. Cities are going to play a tremendous role. So it is reorganization of space and relocalization. I don't share, the pessimism of Eloise. You will see that Europe will have anyway to relocalize some of its far away firms, and it cannot do it right now in Europe. It's extremely difficult to re-industrialize Europe. And its normal, perhaps transitory location is its southern frontier, which is North Africa, and beyond Africa as well. Because you have so many commonalities of language, of already tradition, of commercial and trade circuits. And don't forget that this pandemic has proven the capacity of some country, you were citing Morocco, my own country, the capacity of these countries to adapt, the agility with which it has redeployed all its industrial infrastructure to address the demands of the nationals, but as well of Europe. And now we are exporting a few things to Europe. So you cannot relocalize everything in Europe just because it will kill the industry themselves. They cannot afford it. So the natural place for relocalization is, of course, the Southern Shore, where I'm sorry to tell you that all the legislation is already in harmony. We have had an extremely hard time in Morocco to digest what we call l'acquis communautaire. It was a huge challenge. It has killed a lot of small firms, of small industries, and of small niche. And that's why we have chosen a few places of excellence, like green production of cars in Morocco. It is the first green plant car in the world, the Renault plant in the north of Morocco. And where Renault has said it will, despite the recommendation of the finance minister, Mr. Le Maire, economy minister, that it will maintain its location in Morocco, just because don't forget that if you do not give opportunities to the South, and including North Africa and Africa, first, we will have no means to buy what you sell us, and you sell to us, you Europeans, much more than we export to Europe. Second, you will have to host all the youth, which will have no choice but to emigrate. And nobody wants that. We want to keep our talent, and you want us to keep our youth in their own country and in their own economy. So we have really, and above all, we have to fight common perils. On the top, I said it already, but it's extremely important to reach food security, sustainable development, and ecology, and fight climate change, but as well common security, which is absolutely basic. And we have to work for common shared prosperity through this co-location. We are going to find ways. A few firms can be relocated at the same time in Europe and in Africa, because you have short circuits. And we will have to go, all the world will have to go for short circuits, for perhaps production of food in the cities. We are working very hard for that now, to make sure that the economy of proximity without huge transportation and pollution will be the favored shore. But we still have a huge challenge. It's the present scope and magnitude of depression and of recession. So each country Each continent is busy trying to find answers first to its own problems. And it's not contemplating. I can tell you that now, to help Africa is not the priority of Europe, even if it can come as part of helping the weakest. But certainly it will not help either Morocco or Senegal as it is helping Europe, especially Spain and Italy, which are the most badly hurt. So this is normal. But we know that it is in our interest to have a very strong Europe, and I'm hoping very much that the plan will be accepted. It will give more confidence for Europeans to go much beyond. But Europe has still a huge challenge. This present depression, to reinvent its own democracy, because it is in crisis, you know it, and this is a huge problem, and its own cohesion. And on top of that, the biggest challenge that we have to overcome, but we can overcome it only together, is to fight the rise of inequalities. We cannot create archipelagos of prosperity and of resilient systems within an ocean of poverty and of deprivation. We have to be very, very, very skeptic about inequalities and make sure to avoid that the extension, which is already devastating to countries, but among countries, make sure that they do not develop much more. Sorry not to have, I don't want to monopolize the floor, so I stop there. There will be probably a room for another question.
Thank you.